Welcome to Headstones and Microphones Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Today we are hanging out with a true titan of the skies, a man who took aviation from the muddy cotton fields of Louisiana all the way into the global jet age. I am talking about the principal founder and longtime leader of Delta Airlines, Mr. C.E. Woolman. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Calvin. It is an absolute privilege to be here with you today, and I am deeply grateful for this wonderful opportunity to sit down and share a few stories from the journey. It is truly an honor.
The honor is all ours. Let's dive right into your incredible story. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
It really goes back to the early 1920s when I was working as an agricultural extension agent for Louisiana State University. The entire southern cotton economy was under a terrifying siege by a tiny insect called the boll weevil. It was absolutely devastating our farmers. I observed the brilliant work of an entomologist named Dr. B.R. Code, who was experimenting with dropping a dry powder called calcium arsenate from old U.S. Army biplanes. Seeing those planes glide over the fields, it hit me like a lightning bolt. Aviation wasn't just a novelty or an amusement for county fairs. It was a tool that could save a multi-million-dollar industry. The skeptics thought it was absolute madness to fly massive, heavy machines just feet above the tree lines to dust crops. I convinced them by showing them the cold, hard numbers. When a farmer saw his neighboring field completely wiped out while a dusted field thrived, the skepticism evaporated rather quickly.
That is amazing. Talk about a literal trial by fire. Leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in, and what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
By the mid-1920s, I had a comfortable, secure position with the university, a beautiful wife, Helen, and 2 young daughters to support. But my heart was entirely captured by the potential of flight. In May of 1925, I made the official leap and joined Huff Daland Dusters as their chief entomologist and general manager. We moved our operations down to Monroe, Louisiana that summer. The core belief that gave me the courage to step off that ledge was a simple one. I knew that if you can provide a service that truly helps people and solves a desperate problem, the business will find its wings. I knew the risk was enormous, but the belief in the utility of the airplane was far stronger than any fear of failure.
I love that. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
People looked at aviation in those days and saw danger, instability, and a playground for daredevils. When you looked up aircraft companies in the directory back then, they were often listed under amusements. The one truth I held onto, which almost everyone else dismissed as a pipe dream, was that aviation could be an everyday, reliable, and entirely professional commercial enterprise. They thought airplanes were strictly for stunts, but I knew they were meant for commerce, for moving goods, and eventually, for moving people safely across great distances.
It is wild to think about a major airline starting out as an amusement. But long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong? And how did you find the willpower to restart?
That was an incredibly dark time. We officially launched our very first passenger flights as Delta Air Service on June 17, 1929, flying 5-passenger travel air monoplanes from Dallas, Texas across to Jackson, Mississippi. We were doing it completely unsubsidized, without any government airmail contracts. Then, the Great Depression tightened its grip on the nation, and by October of 1930, we were completely forced to suspend our passenger operations. Another airline was awarded the airmail contract for our route and bought up our passenger assets. It felt like everything we had built was completely stripped away. but I refused to let the dream die. A local banker named Travis Oliver and I gathered up a small group of local investors right there in Monroe, and on December 31st, 1930, we formed Delta Air Corporation to buy back our original crop dusting assets. We went right back to our roots, dusting fields to keep the lights on and keep our people employed until we could find a way back into the passenger business. The willpower came from looking at our loyal workers. I couldn't bear to let them down.
That resilience is exactly what makes a legendary founder. Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
When we finally won our post office airmail contract in 1934 and resumed passenger flights as Delta Airlines, our strategy was centered around a philosophy that many industry insiders questioned. We chose to focus heavily on serving the underserved, mid-sized cities of the South, stretching out from Fort Worth over to Charleston. The big players were focusing on the massive northern trunk lines, and many thought a primarily southern regional carrier couldn't compete or sustain itself. We responded by leaning heavily into unmatched hospitality and reliability. We treated every single passenger like an honored guest in our own home, proving that the South deserved world-class air service.
And look how that paid off. Behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure, whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
The weight could be quite heavy, especially during the lean years of the Depression, and later during the intense demands of World War II, when we completely turned our operations over to modifying over 1,000 warplanes and training military pilots. I shouldered that burden by keeping my focus entirely on our people. I always believed that if we took care of our employees, they would take care of our passengers. My faith also played a massive role. I kept my focus on being an active, quiet member of the First Presbyterian Church, and I poured my stress into a very quiet, peaceful hobby of growing orchids. Bringing a fresh orchid into the office to surprise the ladies working at the desks was my way of keeping things gentle and grounded when the corporate pressures grew immense.
Orchids. I love that image. Who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
The very first people to truly buy in were the local businessmen and planters right there in Monroe, Louisiana, like D.Y. Smith, who became our first president, and Travis Oliver, our brilliant treasurer. To convince the early crop dusting pilots, I had to offer them an environment where they felt respected and valued, rather than just being treated like barnstormers. For our customers, it was all about demonstrating absolute honesty. My lifelong credo was that any business that is completely honest in all its dealings is bound to succeed. We built trust by delivering exactly what we promised, face-to-face, with a firm handshake.
Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
The undeniable turning point came in 1941, when we officially made the big move to transfer our headquarters from Monroe to Atlanta, Georgia. We negotiated a long-term lease near Hapeville, and suddenly, we were positioned at the true crossroads of the South. Shortly after that, in 1945, we were awarded the highly coveted route stretching all the way from Chicago down to Miami. That single award added over 1,000 miles to our system and instantly transformed us from a regional carrier into a major national airline. That was the moment I knew we were playing a whole new ballgame.
Moving to Atlanta changed the game completely. You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence or service?
We instilled it by practicing what I like to call a paraphrased version of the golden rule. I used to tell everyone in the office, let's put ourselves on the other side of the ticket counter. If you can step into the shoes of the customer who might be nervous, rushed, or tired, and treat them with genuine warmth, excellence becomes second nature. In those early days, I knew every single employee by their first name, their spouse's name, and their kids' names. That intense mutual relationship created a family bond where nobody wanted to let anyone else down.
History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
The press frequently referred to me as a stern patriarch or a gentle autocrat. Because I kept a very tight, disciplined ship and was quite guarded about my private life, some folks thought I was unapproachable. But the truth is, my ultimate dismay as the airline grew into a massive corporation was that I could no longer remember every single employee's name. It broke my heart a bit. I never wanted to be a distant executive in an ivory tower. I always considered myself just an agricultural engineer who loved aviation and loved his workforce.
Building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was undoubtedly the sheer amount of time spent away from my home, my wife Helen, and my daughters during those foundational decades. In the 1920s, I was traveling all over Texas, Arkansas, California, and even spent months down in Peru securing air traffic rights amidst local revolutionary activities. You miss a lot of quiet family moments when you are chasing a dream across continents. But looking back at the incredible family we built within the airline, and knowing we created a safe, honorable company that employed thousands of wonderful people, I can say with a humble heart that it was worth every single mile.
If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would look that young man in the eye and say, trust in your people, stay completely honest in the dark times, and remember that the constant change is the only predictable thing about the sky.
Wow, that is incredibly powerful. Before we sign off today, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to leave with our listeners?
I just want to say a final word of thanks to you, Calvin, for your wonderful hospitality, and to everyone listening. If there is any small lesson to take from my time on this earth, it is simply to treat people right. Look at every challenge from the other side of the counter, and never underestimate where a small, honest idea can take you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Woolman. What an absolute privilege to hear about the journey from crop dusting in Louisiana to building a global aviation giant, all grounded in the golden rule and a deep love for people. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.